Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Isabella Chu, and I'm the founder of Redwood City Forward. And the purpose of this organization is really to broaden the conversation around land use policy in the Bay Area. And I'm here today to talk about making room in Silicon Valley, why it matters, and how to do it. So the way I got here was I was actually the research manager for a large division at Stanford School of Medicine, and I was hiring a lot of RAs. And what I found is that housing played a bigger and bigger role in my ability to recruit, retain employees, and that it really impacted what I had to pay them in order to take the job. For example, you have to pay a research assistant about 20% more at Stanford than you'd have to pay the same employee at Berkeley. And it wasn't just research assistants. In every conversation around faculty recruitment, we had to talk about housing and what kind of recruitment package we would have to put together to enable them to live close to campus, which is an expectation for faculty. And it also impacted our ability to retain people like medical assistants since they were taking jobs closer to where they lived in outlying areas. And so all this got me to thinking about institutions and businesses really have to address housing, and particularly housing close to where the jobs are, in order to remain prosperous. But the thing that really got me caring about this was the large and growing body of research on the way where we live impacts health and well-being of individuals. So this is a slide from a paper published a couple years ago by Mark Cullen and Victor Fuchs. And it's a kernel plot showing the probability of survival till 70 by county for every county in the US where the number is big enough to make this calculation. And what you say is there is a huge dispersion. And if you're a black male in the poorest counties in the US, you have less than a 40% chance of making it to the age of 70. If you're in the richest counties in the US, which is San Mateo and Santa Clara, for example, you have almost an 80% chance. And Raj Chetty has really done a lot of work in this space, looking at the impacts of migrating from one of the counties on your left to the counties on the right. And it turns out it really impacts the health and the wealth of the individuals doing the migrating. And it got me to thinking that making room in prosperous places had the potential to be a very powerful public health and anti-poverty intervention. And so how do we do this, and why is it so tough? Well, it's fairly straightforward. There's a very strong demand for housing. The economy's doing great. There's lots of good jobs. And there's short supply. And the reason there's short supply is limited land. We have bays and open space. Usually when cities pencil out offices versus housing, offices come out a bit better. There can be strong neighborhood resistance. Every time a big building full of housing is proposed, the city council gets lots of angry letters. And there's a very high regulatory burden. And over time, this has resulted in a very large housing jobs imbalance, which I'm sure most of you know. Regionally, it's about 1.3 to 1. In places like Palo Alto, that ratio is closer to 3 to 1. So how do we get more housing? And I'd say the simplest solution is to go back to building cities the way we did for hundreds of years prior to the implementation of modern land use codes. So this means things like greater height, close to transit. It means allowing for greater density, reducing setbacks and upzoning where it makes sense. It means allowing for mixed use so that people can live and work and shop in the same place. And it means an end to parking minimums, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So this really illustrates the difference between human-centered city planning and car-centered city planning. So the picture on the upper left is downtown Mountain View. You see it's very compact, it's very walkable, it's very inviting. There are businesses along the street, and then you've got offices and residences kind of above in the back. And on the right is car-centered design. So you see a giant parking lot, and the business is way far back. This is not somewhere you would ever want to really walk to. And then the same thing happened to residential design. You see, garage-scape with housing in the back, whereas on the right, you see the building all the way up to the sidewalk, so very little setback, and you can pack a lot of housing, and I would say very inviting and good-looking housing, in a small space. And the way I really started thinking about the car-centric nature of modern planning was that I keep my bikes in our garage. It's pretty much empty. I just have 2 bikes in there. And I thought, oh, I can put them in a shed or something and convert our little garage to an apartment for 2 people. And this is a model of what that could look like. But when I looked into it, I found out this is actually illegal. This is the minimum parking requirement for Redwood City, which is actually one of the most progressive cities on the peninsula with regard to housing policy. And for my little 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom tract house, I both have to have a 20-foot setback in front, which allows 1 to 2 cars, and I have to provide a 2-car garage. And if you think about it, this is a housing guarantee for cars. And in the most brutal housing market in the country, there's no law or mandate that says I have to provide an apartment for my aging parents. There's no law that says you have to provide a bedroom for your kid. And if you want to convert that housing for cars to housing for people, you're prohibited from doing so. So I thought, this is nuts. I wonder if anyone's actually looked into it. And as it turns out, it's one of the most studied and well-understood policies. There's a flotilla of studies on this, and pretty much every economist that's looked at it thinks it's a bad idea to have parking minimums. And there's a lot of reasons. They degrade the landscape, they encourage sprawl, they drive up the cost of everything, but really what they do is they drive up the cost of housing, particularly at the bottom end of the market. And this is how they do that. These 2 pictures are from the same residential neighborhood in Seattle. And you can see the building on the right. It's an old-time building, and it's built right up to the curb, and they've got about 4 stories of housing there. The 2 buildings on the left were built after modern land use codes came into play, so you see bigger setbacks, so you lose some of the housing there. But then there's a mandate that there's parking provided. So the whole bottom floor of both of these buildings has been replaced with parking. So not only have we lost housing, but now the builder has to get the same amount of money out of fewer units, so that drives up the cost. And I would argue probably makes it more expensive to build high quality housing, again, because you have to get more money from fewer units. So what do I propose? To remove parking minimums and let the market decide the right amount and the right price for parking. And the reason I believe that this will have a good outcome is because businesses and landowners and developers have a very strong incentive to get the amount and the price right. If they don't, they lose customers and they lose tenants. If they don't get it right, they have the flexibility to work with those around them to find the right balance and the right price. So just to review, human-centered city design is economically productive. Free parking does not generate revenue, and it displaces people and businesses. Good human-centered design makes room for more people close to jobs, thereby reducing commute time, which both contributes to retention of employees and also improves public health, but I don't have time to get into that. It's hospitable to people, it's walkable, and I would add, it's beautiful. So in conclusion, human-centered design and people make cities interesting, they make cities economically productive, and if we make room close to where the jobs are, our cities will continue to thrive. Thank you.